Hey, Tyler. Not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Cool. Okay. Now, do you know how we kick things off?
Should be good. I see folks are joining. I see Kai is there
Yep.
as an attendee, so they can hear us.
Okay.
So
Sounds
yeah,
good. Hey,
you sh
Kai.
should be good to go. Yeah, we've got
Cool.
other folks joining now too. So whenever you want to start, I typically give folks a minute or two to kind of funnel in, but yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. Yeah, I'll give them a couple minutes. In the meantime, what I will do is share this quick agenda here, just so folks know what we're going to get started. I'm going to assume that's a yes. Okay. Let's see. It's 12:01 now. We'll give folks another minute.
And we're
And
just seeing your Slack, by the way.
ooh, that's not great. Hold on. See if I can share this instead.
Yep. Now you're good.
Cool. Okay. All right. So it's 12:01. Um, Thank you for those of you who are here. I think this will be pretty quick one today. It's unlikely we're going to take the full 30 minutes. And I'll get started in about a minute. But just so you're aware, essentially what we'll be talking about today is how can you best leverage AI for generating real production applications. I know a lot of folks out there have probably tried vibe coding and it actually works quite well, but you might have also seen some of the horror stories out there about how AI deleted the entire production database, or just even how 6 months in you try to go change a feature and it's really really hard. And so my hope for today is to essentially walk through the practical aspects of using AI for coding. Now, I am a software guy, and so my hope is that this won't be too technical. I'm going to try to keep it high level and make sure that we can sort of talk about the strategies and tactics that it takes to do vibe coding well and to do it without blowing up your app. So we'll go ahead and get started now. I'm going to see if anybody's got questions along the way. Just raise your hand. I am going to try to just walk through some practical examples here, and let me make sure I can see whenever somebody raises their hand. Tyler, can you raise your hand really quickly just to make sure I
Yep.
see when
And
when it comes through?
and yeah, and I'll monitor. I don't know that folks are able to actually like
Hmm.
chat. We can change those settings, but usually folks are using the Q&A function, but you might have it set up where they can chat.
Okay, sounds good. Cool. So let's jump in. So, really quickly, you guys are seeing the agenda, but really quickly, just a little bit about myself. So I'm Shanif, and my background is mostly in data science and software. Been doing that for more than 25 years at this point. And most of that time, I have been writing code myself. And about 12 months ago, give or take, I started using AI for coding, and I probably haven't written more than 30 lines of code since then. But I have been fairly active in developing product and pushing things out the door. And so what I will be talking about today is practical tools and tips on how to use AI to develop applications. Here's the quick agenda for what we're going to talk about. Like I said, I think this will take 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less if you all have questions. First, we'll talk about how do you actually get started, the tools that you want to use, specifically the AI tools. What's the trade off between using some tools and others? And then practical aspects. How do you actually use another tool called Git if you're not familiar with it? Um, then the practical aspects of actually starting to develop an application. Why it's important to track the work outside of the AI agent. How do you get started? Basically, having the AI write out a plan or a spec, and then coming up with a set of individual tasks to work on, building incrementally, adding tests, and then getting your app live, called deploying. The way I'm going to work is walking you through two different actual live examples of what we have built at Nobi. So Nobi is the company Tyler and I have started, and it is essentially an AI assistant and search engine for websites, mostly e-commerce stores. We've built this search engine, but we've also built something interesting, an automated SEO tool that allows us to quickly produce blogs and articles. And what I wanted to do today is essentially use those as examples for how I, quote unquote, vibe coded these different applications. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Now, for those of you who have not coded before, who are not technical, one thing you might be wondering is how do I even get started? What do I do? Well, when it comes to getting started, I always say, it's best to have an idea in mind of what you're trying to do. And so, what I'm going to show you really quickly are a couple of previews of the applications that we have built using vibe coding so that you get a sense for what we're talking about today. And so, you also have a sense for understanding once you've got an idea in your mind, that's the starting point. And then, how do you go from there? Okay, so first, let's just quickly go over the Nobi application. I always like to use Lucchese as an example. We have Nobi's search engine running on Lucchese. This is it right here, as you can see, a little fly out search window. And then when you click on an item, it'll show search results. You can also type in items and conversations here. Okay, so this is Nobi, and about, let's say, 70% of that was vibe coded. So that's the first example that I'll be using today. The second example is what I mentioned earlier, which is a tool to automatically generate blog posts and articles for Nobi itself. So the output of that is going to look like blog posts. And so if you come to Nobi's website and you go to our blog, we actually have a series of different articles that have been sort of almost entirely automatically generated by a vibe coded application. So here's an example: AI assistance for car dealerships, intercom alternatives, best AI search solutions. All of these, Nobi versus intercom, all of these were essentially 95% created automatically, but they were created using a tool that was specifically designed for coding or for generating blog posts. Okay, so that's kind of step one. Step one is having in mind an idea of what you want your application to do. Now, I know it sounds kind of silly and stupid, but it's actually really important because the big thing when it comes to AI coding is planning and documentation and clarity of thought. So upfront, just knowing essentially how you want your application to work and behave. All right. So once you've got that in mind, then how do you get started? So let's talk about tooling. Well, when it comes to when it comes to coding, you've got a couple of options. You've got Claude Cowork, you've got Claude Code, you've got ChatGPT Codex, you've got Gemini. There's a bunch of different applications out there that are specially made for creating applications. Now, if you've never coded before, you might be tempted to start with something like a Claude Cowork, and I'll walk you through what that looks like. Claude Cowork, I'll drag it over here, is a desktop application, and it's basically the Claude version of Claude's website, but just on your local machine. Now, what's what's good about that is you can start to give commands to Claude, and it will start to follow them, and it can actually create files on your local computer. And when it comes to coding, it's all about creating files and then using an application to actually run those files so you can run your code. I actually started creating the SEO engine in Claude Cowork, which is a feature that's within Claude that allows Claude to use your computer. It allows Claude to actually run Chrome and specific applications. And I tried to go pretty far with this particular application. In fact, I think you can see here, I have got a bunch of different tools that I was up and running. One of the things I tried to do was start to use Claude Cowork to generate this automatic marketing SEO engine. But then I stopped. I actually found that to be kind of complicated. There's a few issues with Claude Cowork specifically that make it hard to code. Specifically, it has some trouble. It can have trouble writing files. to your system. It can have trouble executing files, which is why I, as a software guy, default to using Claude Code. And so I will basically show you what Cloud Code is. And my request to you is if you're not technical, don't get scared. I'll walk you through really quickly what that looks like. All right. So Cloud Code is a command line application. And if you've never used the command line, again, don't get scared. It's actually quite easy. So what I do when I start working on a new application or a new feature is I spin up Cloud Code. And I've actually got a quick shortcut here that helps me do that. This particular instance of Claude is running within the Nobi code repository. So Nobi's got a couple 100,000 lines of code at this point, and I started Claude in the directory that has all that code, and that allows Claude to understand what it's looking at, and essentially the files that it's going to work with. Okay, so if you don't like Claude, or let's say you've already got a subscription for something like ChatGPT Codex, or you're using Cursor, there's lots and lots of different tools out there, but they all do the same thing. They're all essentially designed to help you write an application, essentially writing code. But again, you don't need to be technical to use them. So before I start jumping into Claude Code, I did mention there was one other tool that I recommend you have, and that tool is called Git. And specifically, there's a website called GitHub, which is really helpful to have. If you've never heard of it, GitHub is a tool that allows you to store all of your code related files in one place. And then it lets you also keep everything um, security permissioned and shareable. So I have all of my applications in GitHub. Even if I'm the only person working on it, I will actually store everything in GitHub because then it allows me to do a few other things. So here's an example of the Nobi marketing application, which right now really only runs on my computer. It's still in GitHub. Okay, so let's just move forward now. All right, so we've talked about some of the tools. Here's here's how I generally get started when I start a brand new application or a brand new feature from scratch. I actually ask Claude to generate its own understanding of what I'm trying to do. So I will actually jump into a tool like Claude Code and I'll say, hey, I'm trying to build this particular feature. Here's a good example that we're working on right now for Nobi. In Nobi, we're trying to build up our own uh, dashboard to show you the conversations that somebody is working on. So I just had it open. I'll try to get that up and running. But the example that I'm going to use today for this is, hey, I want a page where a merchant can come in to the Nobi dashboard and then go in and see all the conversations, the messages and the orders of the messages that people are working on. And I just want you to write down what you think that should do. And I actually have Claude Code do that in a totally separate window. And what I'm going to drag over here is the Notion backlog. There's a Notion board that I use for keeping track of all of my tasks. And I say, okay, Claude Code, go ahead and write down what you think I mean when I say I want a page where everybody can come in and see their own conversations. And please write it down in Notion. So Claude Code will come in and it will essentially write down what it thinks I want. So why do I have it go through this? Well, the big thing with vibe coding is it's really easy for these AIs to go down rabbit holes and to get caught up in loops where they don't know what they're doing. And so by having an external location where you can start to track the highest level outputs and the individual tasks, it gives you a way to make sure that these LLMs are not losing control, that they're not spinning out of control. So the very first thing you want to do is just have Claude Code essentially parrot back to you what you think it should do. Then you can go through and look at all of the different things that it has tried to do or decided to do. And you can make corrections and you can say, hey, what about this or what about that? And then once you've got it at a place where it makes sense, the next thing I have it do is create a plan of action. So what we're looking at here, there's only two steps in this current plan of action, but create a plan of action for how it plans on actually creating the particular feature in question. So in our case, creating the single page on Nobi's dashboard where it can actually show you all the conversations. So the main takeaway right now is rather than typing in the Claude code, hey, this is what I want you to do, start working on it right away. Take a little bit of time to plan it out and to allow Claude code to think about it. And this is probably going to make the biggest impact when it comes to vibe coding is just having a place where you can track all the tasks and the progress of the tasks that's outside of the AI system that you're using. And again, it's really because vibe coding works really well when you are able to steer the ship and you can sort of watch as the system continues forward and you're able to monitor what's going on. So, might be surprising, but before you give a single instruction to the system, before you have it do anything, just write it out what it is you're trying to do and write it out what the steps are. Now, if you're not technical, that doesn't matter because you can see here everything I've said so far talks about having the AI actually write out the steps and the plan and everything it's trying to do. You might not understand it. If you're technical, you probably want to walk through it, make sure you get all the things that are going on. But it's the process of writing this down and thinking about it that makes the most sense. All right. Any no questions so far, I think. And so what I'll do is I will now sort of move on to what happens when you actually get up and running. So let's say here's a good example. We didn't have a single page on our dashboard where people could go through and they could see all the conversations. That's something we're building now. I asked Claude Code to think about how it would do that. It came up with two steps. Each step has a sub-step or a series of sub-steps. So essentially what I would do at this point is I would say, okay, go ahead and implement step one. And then I'll have it actually stop after it's gotten through step one. And I'll say, let's review. So the next best thing you can do when you start vibe coding is going through the series of steps that you have one by one. So rather than having it create everything all at once, go through things incrementally. And the reason is, again, because AI systems can start to essentially go down rabbit holes and they start to do things that are a little bit crazy. But if you, as the human, are managing them, you can essentially see what's happening at each step and make sure that it's correct before you move on. Now, if you're technical, you can even go one step farther. You remember I mentioned setting up Git earlier on in the chat. So one of the benefits of setting up Git is you can have automated testing in a way that's really easy to see what's happening. So if I go into the Nobi code base and I go into this actions page here, you can see that we actually have a series of what GitHub calls actions. These are essentially individual things that you can have GitHub do. And one of the things that I have had it do is run a series of automated tests. And when you're working with vibe coding and AI, you can have the AI essentially create these automated tests, which are designed to make sure your application is working properly. So one of the benefits of working incrementally is you can actually have at the end of a particular round of work, so at the end of one of these sub steps, or even at the end of one of the larger steps, you can have the system go in and write tests and run those tests and make sure that everything is correct. And again, you don't need to be very technical at all to do this. You essentially tell the system, hey, now that you've gotten this work, show it to me so you can open up a browser and see what it looks like. And then you can say, hey, I don't like this. I don't like that. Go fix these things. But now start writing tests and write tests to make sure that not only does this work, but also that it can't be penetrated by a security hack. It can't be in this particular edge case, something bad doesn't happen. Write all these tests and go ahead and run those tests and then make sure that they all pass. Okay, so I've been talking a lot here. I think the high level takeaway again so far is you as a human write everything down that you, sorry, write what you want to have happen, give it to the AI, have it parrot it back to you, have the AI then come up with a plan, and then execute that plan in steps. You'll go through the longest part of sort of vibe coding something is is essentially working with the AI through these series of steps. So, for example, if I start talking about the automation system, the SEO automation system that I created, we had a series of, I think in this case, 13, nope, 18 steps. So this was a bigger project. Sometimes you'll have systems that take 2 steps, like you saw with the conversations dashboard. Other times you'll have 18 steps. This is where the majority of time will likely go because you're working incrementally with 1 step at a time. You have to make sure that each step is sort of done, tested, and working well before you move on. And that's sort of the key of vibe coding is making sure that every building block you create is stable and solid before you move forward. Now, let's say you get through everything. Let's say you get through all these steps. You've gotten through all your manual testing. So, for example, for the SEO system, I actually wanted it to create a local dashboard where it tells me the output of everything it's done, all the articles it's created, all the keywords it's researched. All this is done. What happens next? Well, there's one final step you have to get into, which is how do you make your application available to the people who need it? In the case of this SEO system, it actually runs only on my machine, which means I just have to make sure that it can run when my laptop is on. In this case, what I had it do was I had it come up with a schedule. So it runs every night at uh, at 2 a.m. And it basically runs through this entire series of steps of researching keywords and then outlining articles and producing articles. And I know it works because it's running locally, and I just had it set up an email for me. But in the case of Nobi or something where you actually have a production system that goes live, you probably want to use the AI to think about how do you get this thing up and running on the internet so that other people can use it. And the AI will again help walk you through how do you do it. In the case of Nobi, what we've done is we have these GitHub actions, which are essentially different ways that we can push Nobi to the web. And you can see here, one of them is called the prod deploy API. We have a few different services that we use, production deploy of the front end assistant. And all I would have to do to actually run this thing is click a button or run a command. All of this was developed by an AI in conjunction with myself. And the big things to keep in mind when you're deploying stuff is how do you make sure it's secure? How do you make sure that it actually works online in a way that it is supposed to? And again, how do you make sure that it's something that is reliable and scalable? And these are all things that you can, again, ask the system, ask the AI, hey, now that we're at this step, what do you think about this? Or how do we do this? Um, One last thing I'll mention. So I know it's been about 20, 25 minutes. One last thing I'll mention is this all takes a lot of tokens. And so if you're using something like Claude Code, you can use the Max plan, which is $200 a month. In general, I will still run out of, I will hit my limits on that plan, but I'll hit them maybe the day before they're reset or the day that they reset. And it's $200 a month, but it allows me as a developer to move really fast. I know Tyler also uses the same plan and he's also moving fast. Sometimes you'll hit those limits and you'll have to go over them. And you can start to pay for that. But that is something to keep in mind. But at $200 a month, it's a pretty good deal, especially if you are able to do a lot more with the developers that you already have rather than going out and hiring more. Okay, I just talked a lot. I seriously hope that you all are still awake. not bored, and that this was useful. Um, are there any questions at the moment? Just take a look here. Okay, I don't think there are any questions. So what I'll leave off with is this: if you all have any questions or you're wondering how do you do this in a way that's secure and scalable, feel free to reach out. My name is Shanif at nobi.ai. Tyler and I are also starting to build these sort of AI systems for companies now to supplement what we're doing with Nobi. We're building these systems that can essentially address problems that companies are having. And so if you are interested in us doing that, or if you want to talk about the SEO system we built or anything of that sort, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. I hope this was useful. And, we're not quite there at the weekend yet, but have a great end of week and weekend. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time.